With the release of the Claude Opus models, Cowork, and new features like skills, plugins, and connectors, Claude is getting unbelievably capable at different finance tasks. And Claude is actually leading the entire industry on finance benchmarks. And leaning into this, Anthropic actually released a free Claude plugin with 10 ready to run finance agents. So, considering in the construction industry, one of the biggest problems contractors actually face is solvency. Basically, what this means is that profitable contractors can go broke on projects they deliver well. And it's actually not because they underquote the project or run the job badly, it's simply because they don't understand the timing of when they incur expenses and when they actually get paid for the work they've completed. And with standard conditions like 10% gross profit margins on projects and 30, 45, or even 60-day payment terms, understanding the timings around when you're receiving money and when you're getting paid is absolutely essential for any successful construction business. And I really think the application of AI to cash flow forecasting and finance managing for contractors is a huge opportunity because it's one of these sets of tasks that fall into the should do but don't have the time to do properly. Every contractor knows they should be doing more to address this problem, but fundamentally they're too busy and under the pump to do it properly. And I really believe this is such a good, strong use case for contractors because it falls into this core thesis I have about where to apply AI. And it's fundamentally that we should be using AI as a data reformatting tool. And when we actually think about what the core methods behind cash flow forecasting and managing cash flow for contractors, it's really this process of taking our expense data, our contract terms and conditions around payment, our project schedule, and our estimate and budget, and combining all this information together into a cash flow model. So we're actually doing the hard work already by having accurate estimates and budgets, maintaining our project schedule, filing our expenses in the correct folders. All we're actually doing with the cash flow side and using AI as a cash flow forecasting tool. So really just drawing all of these combined sets of data and pulling them together into a model. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how and where you can use Claude to help with finance management tasks for construction company. I'm going to break this down into the pre-construction process where we actually go through and build our original finance model for a construction project. I'll then move on to the construction phase where how we can leverage AI for things like cost tracking and maintaining our cost forecast and updating them. And then finally, the business level where we roll all this information up into a cost database and a business cash position and business cash flow forecasting exercise so we can make accurate predictions about the future of our construction business and can make important decisions like whether we have the cash to hire additional staff or pursue certain projects. Okay, so first up, I want to talk about the architecture and the Claude features we're going to use for a tool like this. So the first tool we're going to use from Claude is actually Claude Cowork, which, if you're not familiar with it, is similar to Claude Chat. However, instead of having a chat where you have to copy in all the context it needs, you actually open it in a folder on your desktop. It can then read and write to all the files within your folder. So for example, I have an example construction project I'm going to go through, which is this one. Within that folder, I have the estimate, expenses, payment claim register, and the program. And my Claude can read and write to all these different files simply because I've opened it in this folder with sample data. Now, the next feature of Claude we're going to be used is actually on the Customize tab, which is connectors and skills. So the first one I'm going to talk about are skills. So skills are pre-built construction workflows that we build once and then we can store to reuse and call every time. So the three skills I'm going to be going through is the actual cash flow forecaster skill, which again, is a series of instructions on exactly how I want Claude to forecast out my cash flows. And nested within this is a format output template I want it to do. So every time I want Claude to do a construction cash flow forecast, instead of having to explain from first principles the entire way I want it to do it, all of this is nested within the skill. And within there is actually a template format I want it to follow. And again, you can have lots of different skills, but the threes that I think are fundamental to using Claude for construction finance is this construction cash flow forecaster, a cash reconciliation skill, which is scheduled skill you go through once per week or once per month and actually updates your project cash position, and then our business cash position skill, which does the same thing except across a portfolio of projects. And then the final feature we have is actually a bundle of skills and connectors, which is referred to as a plugin. So Anthropic actually has a free Claude Finance plugin you can use. And what this has within it is a series of pre-built skills that Anthropic has created and connectors. So connectors is the next feature I'll talk about, which is actually how you connect to external software like Microsoft 365, Gmail, or your other sources of project information. Now, again, to access this pre-built Anthropic skill, simply click Add, Browse Plugin, and just type in Finance. And this is the Anthropic finance skill that you can install and customize to how you want it to do construction tasks. So skills are your pre-built workflows. Connectors are your integrations into your other software and tools. So this happens through a process called MCP. And all it is when you add a connector to Claude, basically, for example, I have a connector to Airtable here, or for example, I have a connector to my Google Drive. What this means is now Claude can potentially, depending on the rules of the MCP, can read and write to all those files. So when we're talking about Claude for finance, probably the most important one is you actually want integration into your accounting software. Unfortunately, for example, QuickBooks, QuickBooks does now have an MCP connection. I stand corrected. So now you can connect Claude to your QuickBooks account, which is actually awesome. And I'm going to add that now because I definitely need that. Now, this actually leads on to my next point, which is where your data lives. Now, my rule with data is you should only have one source of truth for each set of data. Some of this might be in your QuickBooks or accounting. And to be honest, I'm actually really excited that the QuickBooks integration exists because I was doing some horrible work around using Zapier, but the fact that this exists is actually great. But again, I'm getting off track, but your source of truth should actually be your accounting software. The exception to this, I would say, is your actual project data and invoices from suppliers and payment claims you've made to the client that may live in your actual project folders. The reason this is an important point to speak about is that you want your data to live in the source of truth. You don't want your data to live within your workflow. So your skill should purely be the actual process itself and where this data lives. So it should have instructions on, for example, where your project data lives, how to connect to your accounting software, or the structure of your chart of accounts in your accounting software. That should be in the skill. So the skill is like almost the map of where this data lives, but you don't want any data within your skill because that will become a nightmare in terms of version control. Okay, so then I'm going to go open a new chat in Claude Cowork, and I'm simply going to say, so to call a skill, you can either type out the name of the skill using a backslash, and this is the instruction to Claude to run it, or you could in the prompt just say run my cash flow forecast skill, and Claude is smart enough to know that it should run it. But what I'm going to say is, for the Riverton warehouse project, please run the construction cash flow forecast skill and give me a forecast of my cash flow for the project. And I'll just, for some context for the video, I'll say, please understand that this is a sample for a video, so make any assumptions you need. So now Claude is going to run this skill, and what it's going to do is it's going to the data in this folder, so my estimate, my schedule, my contract terms, and it's going to combine all this together to actually generate my cash flow forecast. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is how do you actually set up a skill? And I have a very simple framework for doing this. Number one, you have your input context. So this is the background information it needs to run the task. Then you have your methodology, and then you have your output format. So basically what I will do, and again, this is really easy for construction companies because if you've been following or doing some of these things historically, you have a ton of really good examples. But basically what I'll do is I'll find 5 examples of where I have done this specific task. So where I've taken an estimate, a program and contract terms, and how I've actually built this into a cash flow forecast. And then I will just go through, give it 5 examples and explain in detail exactly how I want it to do this process. So for example, I'll say to it, here is a previous example where I have my input contract terms and conditions, how I take from my contract terms and conditions, the payment terms and the contract payments. And then I use this to forecast out my revenue based on when we're actually doing work, which you get from the project schedule. Here's some examples of this, and here's the exact output format I want it to. Take all this information and compile it into a skill. Okay, so in terms of this actual skill, the first part of this is understanding your revenue, which is your payment from the client. This is going to be driven by 3 variables, which is your contract terms from the client, which is your basically from when you submit a payment claim, how many days after that does the cash land in your bank account, your retention percentage release, and any security, as well as if you have any mobilization or advance payments. Then you have this schedule of values in the contract, which is a list of the payment milestones you'll have. So for example, your earthworks has a value of $150,000. Your building services has a value of $50,000. So this is the broken down of your contract lump sum and the items against which you claim against. And then this third part of this is your actual baseline program, which is understanding when all the tasks will occur, what order they'll occur in, and when they are likely to incur. So if we think about combining those three bits of data to understand our revenue, we have the value of what we're getting paid broken down by scope items. We have the contract terms that determine from when we make a payment claim once we've done the work to when that cash actually lands in our bank account. Then we have the program, which is the overall breakdown of the duration of the construction project and when we think these tasks are going to take place. And combining this all together, we can map out our revenue. The second part of this is actually understanding the timing of our expenses, which determines the type of expense we have. So for example, labor or self-employed employees and overheads will be paid either weekly for typical blue collar staff or monthly for white collar staff. We then have our overhead costs again, which are our recurring project overhead costs, like the cost of site facilities, which would typically be paid monthly. We have subcontractors, which are as per the subcontract payment terms. We have materials, but again, you have to be careful with materials, and this is something you want in your construction program, is often you will order materials long before you have actually done the work, and as per the contract, you can't actually claim for your materials. So you might actually pay for your materials a couple of months before when they're potentially claimable for a client. So that's very important to have something to have in your contract. And then also any sort of plant hire and also any project mobilization costs like design fees or insurances. So it's very important that you understand the breakdown of your expenses and the timing of these expenses. And again, this is in the actual skill, the instructions on how to do this. With your expenses, it's the same philosophy as your revenue, that you're breaking down when these expenses occur across time, with the important caveat that being anything like materials where you're paying for stuff potentially a couple of months before, but that is something you want reflected in your construction program. And then as you see, when I've run this first skill with just that very simple instruction, that it's actually gone and generated me a full cash flow forecast using the data in my folder. So I can actually, this is an actual Excel file that you'll notice it has created in my folder. So I can actually edit and change things if I want. If I just bring this up, we can see it has created my forecast. It is mapped out from the project schedule, the overall month by month of the project. It's made some assumptions around that we have an opening bank balance of 0. So it's actually calculating the cost variance for the project. It's got a breakdown of our different types of expenses and when they're occurring. It's determined the receipts from the client, which would sum to our overall project value. And then it has told us our maximum deficit, which is the maximum dollar value we would need in our bank account to finance this project. Again, this forecast, it's done. This is the template. So this template that it's populated is nested within the skill. So every time I run it, it populates the same template. You'll find something that sort of is a bit frustrating with AI is if you're instructing things without an output template, it'll do stuff in always a slightly different format. The advantage of having the template within the skill is that it's always going to output the same thing in the same way. And then it is actually put this into an S curve where you can see it's got our cumulative cash out, our cumulative cash in, and the sum of these, which is our net cash position with our maximum deficit. Now, the final thing I've built into this skill is some scenario analysis, which basically comes back with recommendations on what the biggest levers we can pull are to improve the cash position of the skill. So number one is obviously 14-day payment terms. If we reduce the period between which we are making claim to when we're getting paid from the client, that's going to improve. We could claim a 5% mobilization fee, front loading and claiming legitimate items. Smaller levers, for example, would be reducing the deposit for our steel subcontractor. If we combine all of these, we can improve our cash position by $840,000, which basically takes our maximum cash deficit of negative $950,000 into negative $110,000. And importantly, this maximum cash deficiency, that is the number we need to understand, because that's how much cash we need in our bank account to finance the project. So this is something I would run during the pre-construction phase. But what about during the construction phase? Well, the construction phase is will have a series of different skills we run. The first one I would run would be to actually take our estimate and convert it into a budget. So I've actually built this into the project cash reconciliation skill, but realistically, I should probably have two skills here. One to actually take our estimate and convert it into a budget. The other one to actually do our weekly or monthly update of our project cash position. And I'll say, can you please run the project cash reconciliation skill and provide an update forecast against our budget? Again, this is an example for a video, so please make up any information you need. Now, obviously, if this was a real world scenario, I wouldn't be saying to make up any information you need. You'd get AI to look for the information in your accounting software or the relevant data sources, or to query you with what it's missing. Right, so the first part of this is it actually needs to take our estimate and convert this into a budget. Now, this, again, I think is a really good thing to pre-package as a skill, because you think about it, our estimate is always going to be structured as in the way the client wants. They'll want it broken down into their pricing schedule. All we're doing is then we're taking the cost of the project, and then we're pre-populating in our budget headings. Because remember, an estimate is the easiest way to calculate the cost of doing a project, but a budget is how we actually track and manage our expenditures. For example, if you're doing concrete works, you might have a budget for formwork against every single structure. But in reality, when you're delivering the project, you would just do one initial order for formwork, and that formwork would be used across 5 structures. So you'd be better off having one single material cost code. You want to take all of these rules and pre-bundle them into your skills. So there's rules about how it takes the estimates or how you've calculated the cost of the project and converts this into your budget. So this is how I organize my construction budgets, just with a simple Excel register where you have a breakdown of all your cost codes, your quantity, your unit of measure, and your rate, and then you can forecast it out. Again, cost tracking is about profitability as well as it is about cash flow. So you would use this to actually track and manage your budgets to determine if the works is coming in under budget or not. Now, if you do want a way better way to organize and manage your cost data than a messy Excel spreadsheet, you could actually use the cost tracking feature within Mastt and track all of your different project budgets, and then actually use AI to convert these into a project dashboard. So basically, through prompting, you can create an entire construction project dashboard that's linked to your actual cost data. Again, or you can use the messy spreadsheet way. Yeah, so if we go back to our Claude chat, what is happening? Claude is actually going through and doing our monthly project cash reconciliation. Now, what this is doing is it's going through and it's pulling all our actual expense data. Again, using that QuickBooks MCP, we could link this to our actual accounting data. It's looking at your subcontractors and suppliers invoices. It's looking at the payment claims you have made to the client. And also it's looking at your actual progress and percentage complete. It's looking at any forecasts you have maintained or updated in your cost tracking and your actual forecasts for different budgets. Basically, it is compiling all this information together. Again, we're using AI as a data transformation tool, and it is going to give us an updated cash position of the project. Okay, so now if we review what it has gone and done, it has gone and prepared our cash position. So our position today, our cash out in the previous month, our genuine cost overrun today. Again, that's looking more at the profitability of the project. It reforecasts our maximum deficit and reforecasts out our closing margin. And we can see it is cost coded all our different expenses. It's pulled this from the expenses folder and our source of truth, which is the accounting data. It has gone and prepared our cost versus budget for the different codes and updated our cash flow and forecast. Again, this is done it in a separate file, but a better way to set this up would be to maintain that original S-curve. That is where our cost forecast lives, and then our cost tracking sheet is where our project profitability lives, and that is where we're coding the expenses. And again, I keep coming back to the same point that this is such a good use case of AI, and it's going to do it very reliably because all we're doing is taking data from different sources and pulling it together and formatting it. Now, the final stage to this is we're going to run our business cash position, and I'm going to say, based on the data for the 3 projects within this folder, can you now forecast out our business cash position, also taking into account our business management costs, and create a Claude live artifact showing this? So that, again, it's going to run the business cash position skill, which is going to look at all our individual project data. So again, this is taking the data for the 3 projects I have within this folder. So the Riverton Warehouse, the Belfield Childcare, and the Marston Depot. And it's also factoring in these business overhead costs we have, which is around $85,000 a month of staff and project salaries, office rent, corporate insurances. So this is a recurring monthly expense that's going to get included into this. And then it's going to create a business cash flow forecast, but instead of doing this as an Excel file, I'm going to do this as a Claude Live artifact. Okay, so one point to stress with this business cash flow forecast, again, now we've got, again, this is a really important point to talk about, but this is now, when we look at our project cash forecast, is we're pulling project data. So again, this is going directly to the source of truth. But now our business cash flow forecast is actually pulling our AI project forecast, which sit on top of this original layer of data. So again, this is when we're deviating more and more from the source of truth. It's very important to state here that the quality of the information that goes into our actual business cash position and our forecast is only as good as the quality of our project information. So when we're running our business cash reconciliation checks, our monthly cash forecast, we have to be making 100% sure that the data that is going into these reports is correct, the way it is formatted, and the forecasts are all correct. Because then if our business cash position has a chance of actually being correct, it needs to be sitting on top of data that is correct. Again, garbage in, garbage out. It's the philosophy behind any of this sort of reporting. So what this has done is this has gone and put all of my data into a live artifact. So what this is going to do is, with a live artifact as opposed to a normal Claude artifact, is this now references the original sources of data. And every month when I rerun my business cost reconciliation, it will update as the data sources update. So what it is doing is, again, it's imaginary data. It's not a real business or a real project, but it's looking at my combined cash position of what is receipts and payments each month. It's looking at my net cash position and the closing bank account of my balance. It's looking at any forward low points or high points. And then this is then the source of data I can use to make important decisions. For example, if I know I have an excess of cash, I can afford to hire a second construction estimator. I will have the cash to cover that bill. If I can potentially invest this in purchasing new plants and equipment, but if I know I'm going to be tendering a new job that has a massive cash deficit going forward, then I'll need to set aside cash to do that. So it's very important that we understand our business cash position. And again, this is probably the biggest one where I'd be careful with completely relying on AI to do it, because it's, again, the project cash forecaster I think is fine because you're pulling the actual sources of truth. But again, this is pulling from the project cash position. So it's AI analysis on AI analysis. It's more likely to have missed things and be wrong. So just careful to understand the issue, the actual underlying data that's going into this. But now I have this business dashboard where I can look at my overall cash position. Again, the beauty with Claude, the beauty with AI is you can customize this the exact way you want to do things. I've spoken about the general philosophy you can use to do this, but again, the beauty of these tools is you can customize them to get them to do exactly what you want.